Deadside, a DayZ meets Rust-style survival shooter, has been really building up its player base by adding 100,000 new players in just 7 days across all platforms. I first played this title back in April last year and came away generally impressed and excited to see where it was going. And frankly, a ton has changed since then. Now, in December, the game got a massive 1.0 update, and since then it's been getting incremental updates that have added tons more content to the game. But I feel like the 1.0 patch update is a little misleading because it sort of feels like what a 2.0 patch might do for a game, where it's reworking the fundamental aspects of the balance, massively expanding the map, changing the pacing of everything. It's a pretty big refactor to the experience, so if you haven't played it since it got updated to 1.0, I think it's worth checking out. Now, one of the big things that sets this survival shooter apart from, say, DayZ or something is that it's just more accessible, but it's not really sacrificing a ton of its depth. You can get into the game and not feel like you're absolutely gonna get smashed by somebody who's already got all the best gear in the game. You can usually make do pretty well, and it's not that punishing if you do get ganked. And the biggest difference I noticed jumping back into this title after getting the update is the addition of cars and motorbikes. These things spawn all over the map. They don't require any sort of special items or crafting to get them actually up and running, and it just makes a huge difference to the overall pacing. When I first played Deadside, the sheer scale of the map honestly felt overwhelming. A major aspect of this game's progression is just completing challenges, and those challenges spawn randomly around the map. They can be basic things like fighting a bunch of AI and killing their boss, getting an airdrop, investigating a helicopter crash, player base raids, that kind of thing, but actually getting to these challenges was a completely different story before vehicles were in the game. I always felt like I was limited to the challenges that I just had the patience to run to. And now it kind of makes sense that vehicles are in the game because I think they were just designing the spacing of all this stuff based on vehicles being in the game, but we just never had them, so the pacing just never felt right. And now, once you find a vehicle, you can pick whatever challenge you feel like doing and generally get there pretty quickly. It's like getting your first wheels. You finally have actual freedom to go anywhere and do whatever you want. Now, the map is still massive and it takes a bit of time to get across it, and vehicles are not super fast. They're still kind of slow. They're also loud. They attract a ton of attention from other players, so there's some fun balance and gameplay that comes with it. At one point, I was crossing a bridge that was also next to a pretty large player base, and they started shooting at me. I was lucky to actually make it across alive, but at the same time, being able to zoom past a player base is something that I just couldn't do before. They're often so scary to pass by on foot that I would actively go way out of my way to avoid them. But now I can zoom by and potentially avoid getting killed instantly. I also saw a lot more player bases around the map than I did previously, and I think that's part due to the new Building 2.0 system that makes building much easier, though I haven't dove into it that deep yet. Now, the game is balanced in such a way that it feels like no matter where you spawn in, you should be able to find enough resources to survive and fight back, at least against the AI in the start. And I think that's kind of the goal of how forgiving the survival aspects of this game are, is to just encourage exploration, base building, and having fun from the start and not having to try and progress to a point where you can start having fun. And I absolutely appreciate this slightly different approach to the survival shooter. But truly, none of this really clicked until they added cars, as the whole exploration side of the game, which is probably 50% of what you're going to be doing, almost felt like a chore without them. The various towns and challenges aren't more than a few hundred meters from each other normally, but you still had to make tons of compromises and plan your route to maximize travel time efficiency. I spent a lot of time in the pre-1.0 update going from one town or challenge to the next in a straight line simply because it just was the fastest way to get there, even if it might have been more dangerous. But now that I can kind of drive wherever I want to go, I find myself planning my routes in a way that goes to what I think are going to be the most interesting objectives. Not only is it just a huge quality of life improvement, but I find I'm just having a lot more fun in the game because I'm focusing on the things that I enjoy doing rather than just what's closest to me. I actually had a funny moment where I pulled into the safe zone with my motorbike, and while I was doing some trading, 2 players stole my ride. And it made me realize immediately why you can craft vehicle locks in this game. You can also store your vehicles in buildings to keep them safe if you want. So if you're really worried about keeping your car or bike, you actually do have some good options. I just found it was funny that letting my guard down even for a moment cost me my ride. Now naturally there's a lot more than just vehicles that have been added to the game since last I played. The 1.3 update added the ability to store empty backpacks inside other backpacks, which is nice. The previous update rebalanced a lot of the respawn mechanics, and the devs are even teasing the game's next map, which is going to be a smaller, more PvP focused area, so that should change up the gameplay depending on what you are interested in. The new map has also seen some changes. There's a new point of interest called Airfield. It's basically a huge complex of hangars, buildings, and runways. It's also very heavily patrolled with tons of enemy soldiers roaming around, and I got into some pretty intense firefights with the AI there that I'll talk about in a minute, but it's easily one of the better places to head to if you want to grab some loot quickly or you want to find a vehicle. Now, there's still plenty of things that I think the devs need to sort out in future updates. The first is really just the AI logic. Seeing a bunch of soldiers swarming me was genuinely stressful, but actually fighting them was like shooting dodos. They voluntarily ran into my bullets. The AI just run in a straight line towards you when they have line of sight, and considering that they're kind of tanky, it does make combat artificially challenging since you really need to dump some bullets into them, but it's not really fun or interesting. This can be a tough problem to solve in a large-scale multiplayer game since AI can be quite expensive on the server, and giving them more logic could lead to server slowdowns, but I also feel like it's something that could be done better. There's always some sort of balance or quick trick that the devs can do to make AI feel more engaging. I'd really like to see them start flanking and taking cover. I also haven't seen any AI using vehicles, and I think that would make for some really cool mission types or incentives to ambush vehicle convoys, kind of like you could do in Ghost Recon, where you would get a mission to take out a VIP and they would be in a convoy and you'd have to take out all the vehicles, then they'd stop and the soldiers would get out and you'd have to fight them. That sort of thing could be really cool. It seems like they've got all the tools to make it happen in this game, so hopefully that's planned. Now, there was a change made to the game that I'm not a huge fan of. Money is now fully a virtual item, meaning it's not physically in your inventory. Previously, having to manage and store your cash was an interesting aspect of Deadside's meta that added a little more risk and reward to the gameplay, killing players or being killed. And the cash that you have in the game is a really quick way to get good quality weapons, so it's definitely something you want to build up of. And killing enemy players was a pretty solid way to boost your cash income. But now it seems like earning cash can only be done by selling items, which makes it far less interesting and less incentive really to go after other players. I think the devs could create some sort of hybrid system of what they had before and what you have now, where on a run you would still have to keep all the cash you found and earned on your player, but you would have more opportunities like ATMs scattered around the map where you could deposit that money. That way you still have risk and there's an incentive to go back. Maybe people would camp ATMs, I don't know, but I feel like there's some sort of system they could create to just make it more rewarding to kill players and more risky to stay out longer. Now, all that said, I gotta say I'm quite impressed with the evolution of this game. It felt like something that could have easily been canceled a while back if players didn't stick with it, but I feel like it's really offering something that the other survival shooters aren't, which is a nice, accessible take on the whole experience. I think they're seeing really good success on consoles, and I think there's absolutely a market for the more, I don't even want to call it a more casual survival shooter, but a more accessible survival shooter, because it does seem like there's a decent amount of depth here, especially with all the base building stuff. I'm excited to see where the devs take this project. It's really about balancing the accessibility and the hardcore nature of the game to be engaging for endgame, but easy for new players to get into and enjoy from the start. So many of these survival games really lead into the hardcore aspects of the genre, which can absolutely be fun and a blast, but if you don't have like 8 hours to sink into it or the appetite for getting punished over and over and over again to learn how to play the game, it can be less appealing. And this game, it appeals to me more so than some of the more hardcore games. Anyway, I've enjoyed jumping back into it, and I'm actually curious to try out some of the base building stuff in the near future. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, drop me a like, subscribe for more content like it, and up next, check out everything we know from all of the next Battlefield games leaks that are all over the internet. There's a bit of new information there that is exciting. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap, signing off.